Chapter 23. After accepting Tryon's invitation, I brought up my HUD. 5 new names appeared on my raid plate. I focused on the top one, whose name plate was gold.
Queen Samantia. Raid chat. Tryon.
Shenhua, the Queen requests an audience. I have one who is bound to your hamlet if you would welcome us.
Gemini.
It would be an honor to host you. I hope you'll forgive any disarray you find, as we're still growing and have just welcomed many new people into our fold. It might be a bit chaotic.
Tryon. Outside of the births of her grandchildren, I haven't seen this measure of excitement in my mother in nearly a century. I'm certain she'd forgive foul stenches, floating corpses, or any other strangeness you could offer.
Gemini.
You have a vivid imagination, Prince Tryon. I will send you an instance invite. I looked around at my party. I'd consider it a huge favor if you all would kneel with me as the Queen comes through the portal.
What portal?
Priya asked. The air near the large stone chair shimmered as a white line split the darkness, then expanded into a magical gateway. I thrust a finger. That portal. Amelia stepped toward me.
I don't think...
She cut off her words as my party knelt in a semicircle around the portal and watched.
Oh well, what can it hurt?
She knelt beside me. I was about to meet the queen of an ancient race, and memories of Tolkien swam in my head. I couldn't help but grin. Tryon's appearance immediately reminded me of Giles, from whom I hadn't heard in some time. I needed to reach out. 2 elves stepped through next. One wore a bow over her shoulder. Crossing straps of smooth ivory-colored leather barely hid her chest. Her raven hair was twisted and tied into a complicated weave on one side, and shaved close on the other. The second was a tall male in pristine white chain with short swords sheathed on either hip, and the pommel of a third rising from over one shoulder. After a quick visual sweep of the room, they parted, and stepped to opposite sides of the portal in smooth, synchronized motions. I stared at the portal, waiting. A vision of an aged woman with flowing white hair and beautiful golden robes danced in my mind, but it was quickly swept away when the Queen stepped through. She wore a finished cherry chest plate crossed with strings of golden ivy that covered her to the shoulders, revealing deep tanned arms and a long neck. Black polished leather pants devoid of seams hugged a muscular bottom half. Her angular features were complemented by shining azure eyes that reminded me of Priya's. In her high cheekbones and long angular ears, I saw Amelia Horn. Her hair was a flowing waterfall of raven curls that streamed to her waist. The mammoth I'd first met in the back room of a tavern in Broomhill when I was about as impactful on the world as an ant fart came next. He scanned the faces of the kneeling group until his gaze locked with mine. The sword I'd seen leaning against a Broomhill barroom wall with an eagle egg-sized ruby forged into its pommel revealed itself over one shoulder. He nodded.
Hello, Squirt.
I flashed a crooked smile and returned the nonverbal part of the greeting. The warrior scanned the surroundings, then stepped off to one side behind the Queen. A familiar face appeared behind him.
Mora?
I asked.
Ah, now I remember. You're the one who drove the demon from my dormitory. Seems you and your partner,
she eyed Priya,
held out on me.
She squinted suspiciously, then her face relaxed.
Giles filled me in. It's an honor to meet the real you.
Ditto. Welcome. Brug, I cocked my chin. I was going to invite you over.
Would have been in vain. Giles asked me to guard the Queen until your work was done, and we know not to expect more invaders. He was concerned about lingering stealthies in the forest.
Rashan's lips curved, and she gave a slight nod. I wasn't such an idiot after all. Did you find any lingering rogues? I asked.
Brug pinched his lips together. Just one. Right after the battle. He was taken care of before I arrived.
You sound disappointed.
I am.
With a subtle wink of her eyes, the Queen scanned those present. She looked at me last, then held my gaze.
Shenhua Fowler.
To my utter surprise, she knelt so we were at eye level.
It is I who should kneel. Please rise, Shenhua.
I shook my head. The honor is mine, great Queen. Your son has saved my hide many times, and I owe him my life. The queen rose and tapped my shoulder with 2 fingers.
Up, 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 up.
She threw her hands out and flicked her fingers toward the cavern's roof.
All of you, rise, rise.
My party did as bidden. As I took in the pleased expressions of their faces, warmth tugged at my chest. Priya's smile was wide, and there was no mistaking her enthusiasm. Dusini's open mouth might have caught flies. Queen Samantia grabbed both my hands.
I greet you in the name of my ancestors and offer you our devotion and whatever service we may provide Solara.
The queen embraced me. After a moment's hesitation, and when I realized she was giving me a genuine squeeze, I returned it.
My prodigal son regaled me with the tales of your battles in the Plague Barrens. I've had my archivist begin work on a tome for our library. Maybe you'll come to my city and tell the story from your point of view.
I'd love to.
I can never thank you enough for returning Giles to me, even if only for a short time.
She released me, but gripped my hands again. The honor was mine, Queen.
So formal. You will call me Samantia, or Simi, as my grandchildren have for ages. Now come, introduce me to all these fine-looking folks.
I swept an arm. This is Priya Sky, my life partner and soon-to-be mother of my son. The queen's lips turned up on one side, revealing the first sign of a wrinkle I'd seen in her face.
And daughter of the great matron, whose essence shrouded my son from the sights of those who would have seen him dead for decades.
The queen greeted Priya with the same formalities, then each person in the line until she knew everyone. She even showed love on Charney, who looked like he might scurry off and hide at any second. Finally, she hugged Amelia and set a gentle kiss on her cheek.
My great niece.
She faced me as her arm encircled the young ranger.
I've a real shine for this one. One of the finest marksmen in our regiments.
I've seen that.
Regiment?
Amelia asked.
You mean
The queen nodded.
Tryon told me of your prowess in defending the forest. He believes you already. We will arrange the trials, but not at the expense of your service to Gemini and the goddess. Complete your mission.
She turned.
And perhaps Gemini will fill me in as well.
On my mission? I'd be glad to. First, why don't we give you a tour of our hamlet? I would love for you to meet my foreman.
Lead the way, Shenhua.
She paused.
Oh, I almost forgot. I came bearing a gift.
She swept a hand toward the scantily clad bowwoman. The latter produced a cylinder. Then the queen presented it in both hands.
It is my understanding this would be of use to you. Scroll of Camouflage, level 20. Teaches the reader to change the appearance of flesh and gear to match the surroundings.
I shot a look of mock suspicion at Amelia. Why do I get the impression you've been in touch with the queen this whole time? Amelia raised a shoulder in a half shrug, a repetitive gesture I was growing used to, but the queen answered in her stead.
Of course she has. I writhe with excitement at her descriptions of battle.
You describe battle while you're fighting? Another half shrug. Okay, the Elven Ranger is a badass. I'm thinking you could give me some pointers with my bow, I said.
To see you with your sword, I'm not sure I understand the point. You're near mastery.
And you overstate my skills. I swept a beckoning hand and led them toward daylight. Thank you for this scroll. A lovely gift.
A small trinket. If I didn't know you to be a guardian of the light, I'd shower you in riches and gear beyond imagination.
Hey, who says I don't like gear? The queen laughed. It was a rich, full-throated sound devoid of inhibition that echoed down the tunnel.
Both your swords are fashioned by the hand of the goddess. This chest piece is unlike anything I've ever seen. We are fine crafters, but these are fine pieces.
She tapped my shoulder.
Tell me, who repaired this?
The older man you met a moment ago. Why, you thinking about leeching him? Timpy hustled forward and turned his milky eyes upward.
I've had worse gigs.
Hey, I've got dibs, dude. At least check the place out before you go running off to the elves. Timpy laughed.
Fair enough.
The sun shone in such contrast to Briarton and the interior of the dim cave, it caught me by surprise as we approached the exit. The queen stepped onto the plateau, then her head swiveled left and right as she absorbed the surroundings. The tips of the spirit towers pulsed in the northern and western passes. Brugh stepped up next to me, and I realized just how huge he was when he blocked out the sun. Before that day, I'd only seen him seated at a table. Pulo jogged out of the master's cabin with his beard knot bouncing against his chest.
"The master has returned,"
he announced. Lucius appeared at the corner of the architect's cabin, and the consistent bags under her eyes stood out, even from a distance. Rather than come be sociable, she disappeared back into her hovel.
"Master Gemini, you should have warned me you were bringing company."
I ignored his complaint. Pulo, meet Queen Samansia of the Queen's Forest in the northeastern hinterlands of Surin. Pulo kneeled and pounded a fist to his chest. I was impressed. I'd forgotten the salute. Amelia sidled up next to me and leaned in to whisper.
The queen lives in the city nestled in the forest, not in the woods themselves.
My mistake.
"Mistress Dicini,"
Pulo exclaimed suddenly.
"Your shield!"
The dwarf snatched the halves. I looked past him as I noticed the structure beyond, with smoke wafting from a rounded stack for the first time. You completed the smithy vents? I asked. Pulo lowered the shield halves and nodded.
"Aye, Master Gemini. You should visit Probert. He's becoming quite the hand with an anvil."
I already stopped by. That's how I knew he needed vents.
"I didn't mention your visit. Anything I need to know about?"
It was another matter.
Anvil, you say?
Timpy Gnarling replied.
I'd like to meet this Probert.
The queen echoed the sentiment.
I would enjoy a tour of your smithy.
Let's do that, I said. Maybe he can make you a new shield, Dicini. The elf who wore the two short swords took one half of the beetle shell from Pulo. Why would a Michonne blade dancer use a shield such as this?
Be polite,
the queen replied. The elf's head jerked up under the admonition. Apologies, my queen. I raised a finger. Begging the queen's pardon, I'd like to know what you mean. We thought that shield was kind of cool, if not a little low level. What kind of shield would you put in a blade dancer's hand? The elf ripped one of his swords from its sheath. His hand twisted so the hilt spun in it like a rotor. This kind. A Michonne would benefit more than most. A sword is lighter, more agile in the hand, and the dexterity and flexibility enjoyed by your race complements it.
But it's not a shield,
Dicini said.
I am a tank.
The elf thrust out his hand. I am Yildrin. Dicini shook the hand.
I am Dicini Sher.
Yildrin turned his gaze on his leader. If it would please the queen. She waved a conciliatory hand, the hint of a smile rising. He handed Dicini the sword. Hold this in your non-dominant hand, then draw your main sword. Dicini tested the weight of the new sword, then drew the other.
Dicini Sher has learned the skill, dual-wield swords. Dicini's dual-wield sword skill is rank 1.
I am an idiot, I said.
Why so?
Dicini asked. Because I never thought to check if you could dual-wield. The elf's remaining sword whipped from its sheath in a blur. When you hold the shield here, he pointed the blade at his opposite forearm. You naturally shift your weight onto your front foot to resist incoming attacks. Dicini nodded, understanding. But a more powerful enemy might drive you back by pounding on a shield. Even worse, they could use your forward momentum against you by stepping to the side and letting you pass by. Do you see? Dicini nodded again. A frontline fighter with much bulk would plant the back foot and drive forward with the shield to counteract incoming force. But I suspect your movement speed and dexterous motions would better suit you if you carried fewer encumbrances. Here, think of this offhand weapon as a long shield, and block my strike with it. Yildrin swung the sword. Dicini shoved hers out. Her weapon bounced back toward her upon impact. This time, lower yourself and block high over your head, then bring the sword in your attack hand around. Dicini swept the incoming attack to the side with the borrowed blade, then brought her other sword around and stopped her strike at his hip. Good, the elf smiled. Now if you sweep the attack off to the side, you will have parried and knocked your attacker off balance. Using their momentum against them will allow you to strike harder, cut deeper, and if you stab, you might even run them through. Diciny's head cocked to one side. She flashed a wide smile as his meaning soaked into her brain.
Thank you, Yildren. I will see about having Probert construct a new sword for blocking.
She shoved the sword toward him, but the elf raised a hand, set a few fingers on the flat of the blade, and shook his head. It would honor me to know the bound companion of a mythic fought evil with my weapon in her hand. Please accept it as my gift. He pulled the sword from his back, then slid it into the empty sheath on his hip. I always carry a spare.
I couldn't,
Diciny said. The queen interjected.
Ah, but you will. We have no shortage of swords in my city.
She dipped her chin in reinforcement.
Besides, it would be insulting not to accept. It is our custom to be generous. Oh,
Diciny bowed deeply to the queen, then her subject.
Thank you, Yildren. I will prize it.
The elf returned the bow. Diciny shoved me with the sword, as if for approval. The smile lifting her full cheeks encouraged my own. Lines carved into the blade at the thickest part ran from the hilt to the tip. Striations on the back would tear flesh when ripped from an enemy, if shoved deep enough. The pommel was wrapped in black straps of leather, and its bottom was a rounded golden ball. The handguard curved up on one side, then down on the other.
Elven Sword of Shredding. Level, 23. Type, one-handed sword. Quality, rare. Durability, 75 of 75. 43 to 61 melee damage. Plus 11 dexterity. Plus 10 constitution.
A fine weapon, I said. We appreciate your generosity. A thick figure walked into view from the cave, then passed by our group.
Is that an orc?
The queen's mouth gaped. I nodded. It is. That's Mogu. We call him Moggy. I raised 2 fingers. Moggy, come and meet Queen Semansia Renard. Moggy turned and hustled over.
Yes, Shenhua.
He kneeled before the queen.
It's my honor to meet you, Queen.
My head cocked back. I locked eyes with Pulo, whose smile spread his beard wide. By the taut expression on the queen's face, she seemed to share my surprise.
It is nice to meet you, Sir Orc. I have not seen one of your kind but in books.
Reasonable. We spawn only by a Foundation Master's request. On this continent, anyway.
Please rise,
the queen said. As Moggy climbed to his feet, she asked,
What do you do here?
I interjected. The question, Your Highness, is, what doesn't he do? He's a lumberjack, he runs our sawmill, he trains other laborers, and so much more.
Very utilitarian, then. Well, it is my pleasure to meet you, Moggy.
Thank you, Queen.
Moggy threw me a nod, then hurried away. Dude, I said. What happened to Moggy fight? Pulo chuckled.
Mistress Diciny happened. She insisted he be allowed to learn. That I resisted embarrasses me.
Diciny blushed. I patted her shoulder. Education. Go figure. Let's find a way to spread that around. Maybe even found a school someday.
An academy? A fine idea, Master Gemini,
Pulo said. The queen faced me.
It fills my heart with delight to see what I'm sure will become a fine city under the leadership of the goddesses chosen.
The queen pointed.
Is that Prontu standing in the shadow of that cabin?
I squinted to peer into the shadows and confirmed her suspicion. It is. Have you met?
Giles introduced us when he returned to New Nin.
Is that what you call your city? She nodded.
It is, but we've managed to keep it hidden for ages, so please keep your knowledge of its existence close.
Sure. You hear that, team? No talk of elven cities. A thought occurred. How did the governor's men know about it?
They didn't. It's no secret the elves live in the forest. They just don't know what we've built inside. Our spires are far enough from the coast and shrouded by high trees, so they can't be seen by ships. You must promise me you'll come visit.
I'd love to. I mean, I would really, really love to. She set a hand on my back.
Good. Now I have another gift, as much for your foreman as yourself, but I'll need to survey more of your hamlet. In the meantime, I suspect Prontu lingers in hopes of having a word with you.
His slouched posture and the way his head swiveled constantly to look around at nothing made me agree. Pulo, show the queen the farms, the barracks, and anything else she'd like to see until I can rejoin you. I dipped my chin. If you'll excuse me, Your Majesty.
Stop calling me that,
She smiled.
and yes, I'll excuse you.
Before I parted, I leaned toward Pulo. Lucius is to be locked out of the architect's cabin for 2 days. I want her to rest. She's a workaholic. Finally, from the master's own lips. Now she'll have to listen. As Pulo led the queen's entourage away, I heard him muttering something about my own aversion to formal titles, something the queen and I had in common. Pronto? I said. He looked up suddenly, as if he hadn't seen me walking over.
Ah, Gemini, I was hoping for a word.
I would have never guessed. What's up?
A couple items of some import.
I'm all ears.
First of all, if the Wahrsager is keeping tabs on you, he will know you have defeated the High Priestess. This will inevitably be reported to the governor. I don't know if this knowledge will tip the regent off that you have immediate designs on him, but it's probably not a chance you want to take.
Damn. Good info. We'll need to hustle. Do you think we can afford to sleep tonight and set out for your shop before sunrise?
Yes. When we arrive, we'll need to move quickly.
Can't you do that shrouding thing to change our appearances? Won't that keep him from seeing us?
What? Oh, yes, but I'm afraid it takes a lot out of an old man to shroud a full party. If we move swiftly, the enemy won't find us before we're upon him.
Sounds like a plan. What was the second item of import? He waved a hand of knobby, crooked fingers toward the western pass.
I sense you have visitors outside.